The photograph was discovered inside a burnt leather suitcase that had no owner, no records, and no explanation for how it appeared in the university archive basement. In the image, a grand hotel towered above endless dunes, while half its windows disappeared beneath drifting sand. Written across the bottom in fading ink were the words, "Do not uncover what the desert buried alive." Elias Mercer stared at the photograph long after the archive closed for the night. Dust swirled through the dark room while rain hammered the old windows behind him like frantic fists. The longer he studied the picture, the more he noticed strange figures standing motionless behind the hotel windows. He brought the photograph to the archivist the following morning, hoping for answers about the building. The elderly man turned pale the moment he saw it, and quietly locked the office door. After several moments of silence, he whispered that the hotel had supposedly vanished sometime during the winter of 1928. No newspaper articles officially explained its disappearance, though rumors survived among desert communities for generations. Travelers spoke about hearing distant music beneath the dunes during certain moonless nights. Others claimed screams sometimes rose from the sand during violent windstorms. The building was called the Mirage Crown Hotel, an enormous luxury resort built far from civilization by millionaire investor Victor Langley. Wealthy politicians, famous actors, and foreign elites once traveled across the desert to experience its unmatched beauty and privacy. Yet every surviving photograph of the hotel seemed strangely distorted, as if something moved within the images themselves. Elias became consumed by the mystery over the following weeks. He searched through forgotten newspapers, government records, and abandoned city archives, searching for any trace of the hotel's history. Most documents ended abruptly after December 1928, as though someone intentionally erased every remaining piece of evidence. One night, Elias uncovered the diary of a missing businessman who had stayed at the Mirage Crown shortly before its disappearance. The final pages described guests hearing knocking sounds beneath their beds after midnight every evening. The man also wrote that the hotel walls sometimes vibrated softly like breathing lungs. Elias could not sleep after reading the diary entries. Strange dreams plagued him every night, filling his mind with endless hallways lined by flickering chandeliers and faceless hotel guests. Each dream ended with a woman whispering for help beneath shifting sand, while distant applause echoed in darkness. 3 weeks later, Elias traveled toward the desert town closest to the hotel's rumored location. The town appeared nearly abandoned, with boarded windows and silent streets buried beneath layers of blowing dust. Even the locals refused to speak openly once he mentioned the Mirage Crown Hotel by name. An elderly shopkeeper finally agreed to speak after sunset inside his candlelit store. He warned Elias that the desert around the hotel was cursed, long before construction ever began there. According to local legend, ancient spirits slept beneath the dunes until greedy men disturbed their prison. The old man then revealed something that made Elias's blood run cold. Several explorers had attempted to locate the buried hotel over the past 50 years, yet none ever returned from the desert alive. Their abandoned vehicles were sometimes found half swallowed by sand, with every door hanging wide open. That night, Elias sat alone inside his motel room while desert wind rattled the windows violently. He placed the faded photograph on the bedside table and noticed something horrifying he had somehow missed before. One of the figures inside the hotel window was now staring directly at him with an unmistakable smile. The desert swallowed sound so completely that Elias could hear his own heartbeat while their convoy crossed the endless dunes. Every mile deeper into the wasteland made the sky feel darker and the air strangely heavier. By the third night, even the wind carried faint whispers that seemed to drift beneath the sand instead of above it. Elias traveled with 4 others who agreed to help document the expedition for his research project. Nora handled photography, while Carter navigated the terrain using outdated military maps purchased from a collector in Cairo. Beside them traveled Daniel, a mechanic with a violent temper, and Leela, a historian specializing in ancient desert civilizations. None of them spoke much after sunset on the second evening. Their radios constantly produced bursts of static, mixed with what sounded disturbingly like distant ballroom music. Each time Carter adjusted the signal, the music vanished before returning louder moments later. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the desert became around them. They discovered rusted road signs half buried beneath dunes, all pointing toward destinations that no longer existed on any map. One sign carried faded gold letters, spelling Mirage Crown Hotel -2 miles ahead. That discovery terrified Daniel enough to demand they turn back immediately. He claimed someone had been walking outside the camp during the previous night, circling their tents for hours, without leaving footprints. Nora admitted she had heard high heels scraping across the sand, long after everyone else fell asleep. Leela attempted calming the group by focusing on the history surrounding the region. Ancient tribes once believed the desert concealed entrances to an underground kingdom where forgotten gods were imprisoned beneath black stone temples. According to legend, disturbing those sacred burial grounds invited madness upon entire cities. On the fifth day, a violent sandstorm forced the team to shelter inside their vehicles for nearly 6 hours. During the storm, Elias briefly noticed the silhouette of an enormous building appearing and disappearing between waves of dust. Each flash of lightning revealed towering windows and balconies emerging from the dunes like a sinking ship. When the storm finally passed, silence settled across the desert once more. The group climbed a nearby ridge and froze in collective disbelief at what stood before them. Half buried beneath mountains of sand rested the upper floors of the Mirage Crown Hotel. Its grand exterior remained horrifyingly intact, despite nearly a century beneath the desert. Chandeliers still hung inside the upper ballroom windows, while faded curtains swayed slowly in rooms without wind. The hotel looked less abandoned than asleep, as though waiting patiently for guests to return. Nora raised her camera with trembling hands and began photographing the structure from the ridge. When she checked the pictures moments later, every image showed additional figures standing inside the windows. None of those figures had been visible to the naked eye. That night, the group established camp beside the exposed entrance of the buried hotel. Nobody slept after midnight because strange sounds echoed from deep beneath the sand surrounding them. Some noises resembled muffled crying, while others sounded disturbingly like hundreds of people applauding in unison. Near dawn, Elias wandered away from camp after hearing a woman softly calling his name across the dunes. He followed the voice until he noticed footprints appearing beside his own in the moonlight, though nobody stood near him. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the buried hotel, a massive metallic groan shook the desert floor beneath his feet. The hotel doors opened with surprising ease when Elias pushed against them the following morning. A foul breath of cold air rushed from the darkness inside, carrying the scent of rotting flowers and damp earth. Though buried beneath desert sands for decades, the lobby looked untouched by time. Dust coated the marble floors in thick gray layers that muted every footstep. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, while faded jazz music crackled softly from somewhere deep within the building. Near the reception desk, ancient suitcases remained stacked exactly where guests had abandoned them long ago. Nora discovered a dining hall preserved in horrifying detail beyond the main corridor. Plates of blackened food still rested upon tables beside silverware arranged neatly for unfinished meals. Several wine glasses contained dark liquid that appeared disturbingly fresh, despite the passing decades. The deeper they explored, the more unnatural the hotel felt around them. None of the clocks inside the building worked properly, each ticking at different speeds or spinning backward entirely. Even stranger, their flashlight batteries drained unusually fast whenever they entered certain hallways. Daniel attempted forcing open an elevator door near the eastern wing. The moment the metal doors separated, a freezing gust burst outward, carrying dozens of loose papers into the air. Before the doors slammed shut again, Elias briefly saw bloody handprints covering the elevator walls from floor to ceiling. Lila searched the guest rooms while Elias documented everything with his recorder. Many rooms appeared perfectly ordinary, except for deep scratch marks carved into doors from the inside. Others contained strange symbols painted across mirrors, using what looked disturbingly like dried blood. Inside room 317, Nora uncovered several photographs scattered across the floor beside an overturned suitcase. The images showed elegant parties inside the hotel ballroom during the winter of 1928, yet every photograph contained the same pale woman standing motionless in the background, with empty black eyes. Elias discovered the hotel manager's office hidden behind the lobby staircase later that afternoon. Inside a locked drawer, he found journals belonging to Victor Langley, the wealthy owner who built the Mirage Crown Hotel. The final entries described workers uncovering ancient stone ruins beneath the construction site several months before opening day. At first, Langley considered the ruins an exciting tourist attraction for wealthy visitors. Excavation teams descended underground and uncovered enormous tunnels lined with symbols no historian could translate. Then workers began disappearing inside the tunnels, one by one without explanation. The remaining laborers soon refused, entering the underground chambers after hearing strange voices echoing from the darkness below. Several men reportedly clawed out their own eyes after claiming they saw something moving beneath the stone floors. Langley ignored every warning because closing construction would destroy him financially. That evening, the team gathered inside the grand ballroom while a violent sandstorm raged outside the buried hotel. Elias read aloud from Langley's final journal entry, describing guests suffering hallucinations shortly after the hotel opened. According to the journal, many visitors claimed something was whispering to them through the walls each night. As Elias finished reading, the ballroom chandelier suddenly began swaying overhead without warning. Soft laughter echoed somewhere above them, while dozens of invisible footsteps crossed the ceiling in every direction. Then Nora noticed fresh footprints, slowly appearing across the dusty ballroom floor, leading directly toward a sealed basement door hidden behind the stage curtains. The sealed basement door trembled softly, as if something on the other side pressed against it from below. Dust drifted from the ceiling, while the ballroom around them fell into complete silence. Even the storm outside seemed to stop the moment Elias touched the rusted handle. Daniel refused to continue deeper into the hotel after hearing movement behind the basement walls. His voice shook with panic while he demanded they leave before nightfall swallowed the desert completely. Yet the moment he stepped toward the lobby, the hotel lights flickered on throughout the building without electricity. Every chandelier blazed with dim golden light that filled the corridors with a sickly glow. Somewhere far above them, an orchestra began playing slow jazz music inside an empty ballroom. The music sounded warped and distant, like a recording trapped underwater for decades. Leela discovered a heavy iron chain wrapped around the basement entrance several times. Ancient symbols had been carved directly into the metal links, alongside warnings written in Arabic and Latin. One phrase repeated again and again across the chain: "Never let it hear your grief." Together they removed the chains, while cold air seeped upward from the darkness below. A stone staircase descended beneath the hotel into tunnels far older than the building itself. The deeper they walked, the more the air smelled like wet soil and something decaying beneath stagnant water. The walls soon changed from hotel brick into enormous black stones, carved with disturbing figures. Human shapes knelt before a towering creature with endless mouths stretching across its body like open wounds. Many carvings showed entire cities disappearing beneath giant waves of sand, while crowds screamed toward the sky. Layla translated fragments of ancient texts carved beside the murals as they continued downward. The inscriptions described a buried entity worshipped by forgotten desert civilizations thousands of years earlier. According to legend, the creature fed upon sorrow, guilt, and human suffering until entire kingdoms destroyed themselves under its influence. Further inside the tunnels, they discovered abandoned excavation equipment left behind by Langley's workers in 1928. Rusted lanterns, broken shovels, and torn clothing littered the stone floor beside dried bloodstains. One wall carried dozens of frantic messages scratched by human hands, begging God for forgiveness. Nora suddenly froze after hearing her dead brother's voice, whispering from somewhere deeper underground. Tears filled her eyes, while the voice repeated childhood memories nobody else could possibly know. Before Elias could stop her, she wandered alone into a narrow side tunnel swallowed by darkness. The remaining group chased after Nora through twisting underground corridors that seemed impossibly endless. Their flashlights flickered violently while distant screams echoed through the maze beneath the hotel. Then they entered a massive underground chamber hidden directly beneath the Mirage Crown Foundation. At the center of the chamber stood an enormous pit surrounded by collapsed stone pillars and ancient bones. Massive claw marks scarred the walls, while black symbols covered the floor like ritual markings. Elias realized with growing horror that the hotel had never buried the creature beneath it. Victor Langley and the surviving guests had buried the entire hotel to trap the thing underground with them. The collapsing building had sealed the chamber beneath thousands of tons of sand nearly a century earlier. Then, from deep inside the pit, something enormous inhaled slowly like a waking animal, breathing after a very long sleep. The sound rising from the pit resembled hundreds of lungs breathing together beneath the earth. Warm air rolled upward carrying the stench of decay, wet stone, and something sickeningly sweet. Elias felt the vibration deep inside his chest, as though the creature's heartbeat had begun matching his own. Nora stood dangerously close to the edge of the pit, with tears streaming down her face. She whispered softly to someone hidden within the darkness below, while smiling in a trance-like state. When Elias grabbed her arm, She screamed violently and claimed her dead brother was waiting for her underground. Before anyone could react further, Daniel suddenly pointed his flashlight toward the far end of the chamber. A human figure stood motionless between the ruined pillars, wearing a black hotel uniform covered in dust. Its face appeared horribly stretched beneath the flickering beam before vanishing into darkness. Panic spread quickly through the group as whispers began echoing from every direction around them. Each whisper sounded personal, repeating private memories and painful regrets only they could understand. Layla collapsed to her knees after hearing her deceased mother begging for help somewhere inside the tunnels. The chamber floor trembled violently moments later, knocking loose stones from the ceiling above them. Cracks spread across the ancient pillars, while deep grinding noises echoed through the buried ruins. Somewhere far overhead, the hotel itself began groaning like an enormous ship sinking into black water. Elias forced the others back through the tunnels as the underground structure slowly destabilized around them. Their flashlights flickered wildly while unseen footsteps followed close behind in the darkness. Every few moments, distant laughter echoed through the tunnels beside the sound of clinking wine glasses. When they finally reached the hotel basement, they discovered something even more horrifying waiting upstairs. Wet footprints covered the staircase leading into the lobby, despite the surrounding desert remaining bone dry. Soft jazz music now played throughout the building at full volume, while ballroom lights flashed above them. The hotel no longer appeared abandoned after nightfall, fully arrived outside. Shadows moved behind doorways, while muffled conversations drifted through nearby corridors filled with darkness. Elias even spotted elegant figures dancing slowly inside the grand ballroom before disappearing whenever approached directly. Daniel completely lost control after seeing a woman with stitched eyes standing inside the elevator. He grabbed his equipment bag and sprinted toward the hotel entrance despite everyone screaming for him to stop. The moment he reached the lobby doors, the marble floor beneath him suddenly cracked open like thin ice. Sand exploded upward from the ground and swallowed Daniel within seconds. His terrified screams echoed briefly through the collapsing lobby before vanishing beneath the moving dunes. All that remained afterward was his flashlight sticking halfway out of the sand, while invisible hands slowly dragged it downward. The survivors barricaded themselves inside the manager's office, while the hotel shook violently around them. Outside the locked door, dozens of voices whispered softly through the hallway asking to be invited inside. Nora sat trembling in the corner after realizing the voices now sounded exactly like members of the expedition team. Elias finally understood the horrifying truth hidden beneath the Mirage Crown Hotel. The buried entity did not merely haunt the ruins or trap souls beneath the desert sands. It used grief like bait, creating perfect illusions from human pain until victims willingly surrendered themselves to the darkness below. The manager's office door shook violently as unseen hands pounded from the hallway outside. Dust rained from the ceiling while the hotel groaned like a dying animal buried beneath the dunes. Every few seconds, the voices beyond the door changed into the terrified screams of people the survivors once loved. Elias sat beside the desk with his camera resting on trembling knees, while Nora and Leela argued nearby. Nora wanted to remain hidden until sunrise, while Leela insisted the entire hotel would collapse before morning arrived. Somewhere upstairs, hundreds of invisible guests erupted into deafening applause that echoed through the walls. The lights suddenly died without warning, plunging the office into suffocating darkness. A faint golden glow then appeared beneath the doorway, accompanied by soft ballroom music drifting through the corridor outside. Elias slowly approached the door and noticed shadows moving elegantly beneath the crack-like dancing feet. Leela discovered an emergency tunnel marked on Victor Langley's old hotel blueprints scattered across the office desk. According to the faded map, the passage connected the basement ruins to an abandoned mining route several miles beyond the dunes. It represented their only chance of escaping before the hotel buried them alive forever. The three survivors fled into the hallway while the entire structure trembled around them. Chandeliers swung wildly overhead as cracks spread across the marble walls like spiderwebs. Every corridor now appeared crowded with silent figures wearing expensive clothing from the 1920s. None of the ghostly guests possessed recognizable faces anymore. Their skin looked stretched and melted while black sand continuously poured from their empty eye sockets. Yet each figure smiled politely while turning its attention toward the fleeing survivors. Nora suddenly froze near the ballroom entrance after spotting her dead brother standing among the dancing figures. He extended his hand toward her, while whispering gently that she no longer needed to suffer alone. Before Elias could pull her away, dozens of ghostly guests surrounded Nora and dragged her screaming into the ballroom darkness. Leela and Elias ran toward the basement staircase while horrible sounds echoed behind them through the hotel. The orchestra music grew louder with every step, mixing with Nora's fading screams somewhere above. Then the entire building lurched violently, as though something enormous pushed upward beneath its foundation. They reached the underground tunnels just as parts of the ceiling began collapsing around them. Clouds of dust filled the passage, while ancient stone pillars shattered beside the narrow escape route. Far behind them, a monstrous roar thundered upward from the endless pit beneath the ruins. Leela carried the blueprint, while Elias recorded everything on his camera, despite his growing terror. They eventually discovered the mining tunnel hidden behind a collapsed excavation wall, exactly where Langley's map indicated. Cold desert air drifted through the narrow opening beyond the rubble, like a final promise of survival. As they crawled through the tunnel, Leela suddenly stopped moving ahead of Elias. A soft whisper echoed from the darkness behind them, calling her name in her mother's voice. Elias watched helplessly as Leela slowly turned around and walked back toward the buried hotel with tears streaming down her face. Elias escaped the tunnel alone moments before the Mirage Crown finally disappeared beneath the desert once more. At sunrise, authorities found him wandering the dunes, clutching his camera beside untouched sand with no hotel anywhere in sight. The recovered footage ended with Elias whispering that the guests were still alive below, followed by the sound of distant applause echoing beneath the desert earth.